The morning sun cast long shadows across Tactical Airbase Grayson as Emma Rodriguez tightened the last bolt on the hydraulic system of an F-16 Fighting Falcon. 28 years old, with her dark brown hair pulled back in a regulation bun, she moved with the quiet precision of someone who understood every bolt, wire, and gauge in the aircraft she serviced. "Rodriguez, stop wasting time on those calculations," barked Captain Bradley Morrison as he noticed Emma checking wind velocity readings on her tablet. "Your ground crew don't touch the tactical flight board." Emma looked up from her detailed atmospheric analysis, meeting Morrison's irritated glare with steady composure. She had been quietly reviewing high-altitude wind patterns and thermal conditions that could affect today's training flights. The data showed potentially dangerous crosswinds developing around 1,500 hours that could complicate landing. Procedures. "Sir, I was reviewing weather conditions that might impact aircraft performance during. Did I ask for a weather report from maintenance?" Morrison interrupted, his voice carrying across the hangar. Several other ground crew members paused their work to listen. "You check fuel lines and hydraulic pressure. Leave the flying to actual pilots." Emma remained silent, but her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She possessed skills that no one on the base knew about: advanced training in emergency flight, coordination, atmospheric analysis, and tactical navigation that she had acquired during her previous assignment at the European Joint Training Center. Knowledge that could save lives, but knowledge that her current position never allowed her to use. Lieutenant Marcus Torres approached, carrying a pre-flight checklist. "What does she know besides valve pressure anyway?" he said with a dismissive laugh that made several nearby airmen chuckle. "A ground crew should stick to ground crew work." The comments never stopped. During every briefing, whenever Emma offered technical observations about atmospheric conditions or mechanical concerns that could affect mission safety, the pilots would nod politely and completely ignore her input. She had learned to stay quiet and focus on her assigned duties, checking fuel systems, testing hydraulic pressure, verifying wing stability mechanisms. Simple mechanical work that kept aircraft operational, but never acknowledged the depth of her actual expertise. What none of them understood was that Emma spent her evenings studying advanced aerodynamics, meteorology, and flight coordination protocols. She had acquired textbooks on tactical aviation and radar systems management, not because anyone required it, but because she understood that comprehensive knowledge could mean the difference between pilots coming home alive and mission. Failure. In her small off-base apartment, Emma maintained detailed logs analyzing daily flight operations. She noted navigation errors that hadn't been caught, weather miscalculations that could have caused disasters, and safety issues that had been overlooked by the official planning staff. Her notebook contained hand-drawn flight diagrams and emergency procedures, including one particular entry written in blue ink: "When standard systems fail, trust physics and instinct." Someone must always lead the way home. The irony wasn't lost on her. She could calculate fuel consumption rates that would extend operational range, understand radar countermeasure tactics that could save pilots in hostile airspace, and read weather patterns that could ground entire squadrons. But officially, she was just ground crew, someone who checked tire pressure and cleaned windshields. 3 months earlier, there had been an incident during a night training exercise, and F-16 had returned with navigation problems and compromised radar systems. The pilot had reported receiving radio guidance from an unidentified source that helped him execute a safe landing during dangerous crosswind conditions. The investigation had been inconclusive, but Emma knew exactly what had happened that night. She had been working late in the auxiliary maintenance area when she picked up the pilot's distress signals on the emergency frequency. Without authorization, without permission, and without anyone knowing who she was, Emma had talked the lost aviator through manual navigation procedures using pure mathematics and voice coordination. The aircraft had landed safely, and the official report credited the successful recovery to unidentified ground personnel. The pilot that night had been Second Lieutenant David Martinez, fresh from flight school and scared enough to remember every detail of the calm, accented voice that had guided him home. When Martinez had been permanently assigned to Base Grayson 2 weeks later, he had recognized something familiar about the quiet ground crew technician who serviced his aircraft. "You have an interesting way of working around these planes," Martinez had mentioned casually during a routine maintenance check. "Almost like you understand them from a pilot's perspective." Emma had looked up briefly from her work. "I just try to be thorough, sir." "Ever done any flight coordination work?" Martinez had asked, watching her carefully. "Why would you ask that?" Emma had responded, not meeting his eyes. Martinez had studied her for a long moment, recognition slowly dawning. "The voice that guided me through that emergency landing 3 months ago. The accent, the confidence under pressure. That was you, wasn't it?" Emma had continued working without responding, but Martinez had seen the slight tension in her shoulders that confirmed his suspicions. From that day forward, he had quietly begun including Emma in his pre-flight preparations. Not officially, since she had no authority for flight operations, but finding subtle ways to verify his calculations against her knowledge. He had discovered that Emma could read atmospheric conditions more accurately than the meteorology section, understood fuel consumption mathematics more precisely than the flight planners, and possessed tactical knowledge that wasn't taught in standard pilot training. But she remained officially prohibited from participating in actual flight operations. Now, as Morrison walked away from their confrontation with a satisfied smirk, Emma returned to her maintenance duties. She continued monitoring radio traffic, listening to the constant chatter of training flights and routine operations. Her trained ear caught subtle indicators that other personnel missed, minor navigation uncertainties, fuel consumption discrepancies, and atmospheric conditions that could complicate flight plans. What Emma didn't know was that her hidden expertise was about to be tested under circumstances far more dangerous than a training exercise. In less than 6 hours, a real crisis would strike Base Grayson, and the woman everyone dismissed as just ground crew would become the only person capable of bringing 6 combat aircraft safely home. The foundation of her reputation was already being laid in the minds of pilots who had quietly begun to trust her judgment. Martinez wasn't the only aviator who had noticed Emma's exceptional understanding of aircraft systems and flight operations. Word was spreading, carefully and unofficially, that the ground crew technician with the notebook and the precise calculations often knew more about flying than people with wings on their uniforms. But for now, Emma remained invisible, underestimated, and officially unqualified for the responsibilities that would soon rest entirely on her shoulders. 2 weeks after the confrontation with Captain Morrison, Emma Rodriguez noticed the first serious warning signs that something was systematically wrong at Base Grayson. It started with small things: missing maintenance reports, rushed pre-flight inspections, and an increasing number of minor mechanical issues that were being dismissed as acceptable risks. During the morning briefing in the main hangar, Lieutenant Colonel Patricia Hayes announced new operational procedures that made Emma's stomach tighten with concern. Due to budget constraints and increased mission tempo, all routine maintenance schedules are being accelerated by 30%. Ground crews will complete standard inspections in reduced timeframes to maximize aircraft availability. Emma raised her hand tentatively. "Mom, accelerating hydraulic system checks could compromise safety margins. Some issues require extended diagnostic time." To Rodriguez interrupted Major Kevin Walsh, the maintenance supervisor. "Your concerns are noted. However, these aircraft have been flying safely for decades. I think we can trust our pilots to handle minor variations in system performance." The dismissal stung, but Emma's real concern was the pattern she was beginning to recognize. Over the past month, she had documented 17 separate instances where rushed maintenance had missed potentially dangerous problems. Oil pressure fluctuations that could lead to engine failure, hydraulic leaks that might compromise landing gear operation, and electrical system irregularities that can affect navigation equipment. Her detailed maintenance logs, kept in a locked drawer in her quarters, painted a troubling picture of systematic corner cutting that prioritized mission schedules over aircraft safety. But every time Emma tried to raise these concerns through official channels, she was told to focus on her assigned duties and leave operational decisions to qualified personnel. The breaking point came during a conversation she overheard between Captain Morrison and Major Walsh near the fuel depot. Emma was performing routine tank inspections when their voices carried clearly across the concrete pad. "The Rodriguez situation is becoming problematic," Morrison said, his tone sharp with irritation. "She's been questioning maintenance protocols, taking unauthorized measurements, and generally acting like she has authority she doesn't possess." Walsh nodded agreement. "Ground crew need to understand their limitations. Maybe it's time to consider a transfer request. Send her somewhere that needs basic mechanical work without the complexity of tactical aircraft." Emma's hand stilled on the fuel gauge she was checking. A transfer would mean leaving the aircraft and pilots she had come to care about, removing her from the position where her knowledge could potentially save lives when standard procedures failed. "I'll handle it," Morrison continued. "Make it clear that overstepping boundaries has consequences. She can check tire pressure and clean windshields without all the analytical nonsense." That afternoon, Morrison approached Emma's workstation with a formal written warning. "Rodriguez, this documents your tendency to exceed assigned responsibilities and interfere with operational procedures. Any further instances of unauthorized technical analysis or unsolicited operational input will result in disciplinary action, potentially including transfer to a non-aviation assignment." Emma read the document carefully, noting the deliberately vague language that could be interpreted to prohibit almost any thinking beyond basic manual labor. "Sir, I understand the concern, but ensuring aircraft safety requires understanding systems comprehensively. If I identify potential problems, you identify problems by following established procedures," Morrison cut her off. "Not by conducting unauthorized analysis or questioning decisions made by qualified officers. Your job is maintenance execution, not operational assessment." The written warning felt like a deliberate attempt to silence her expertise, but Emma signed the document without further argument. However, she also made a decision that would prove crucial in the coming crisis. She would continue maintaining her private logs and analytical work, but more carefully and quietly than before. That evening in her quarters, Emma reviewed 3 weeks of accumulated data that painted an increasingly alarming picture. Maintenance shortcuts were becoming standard practice. Safety margins were being reduced across multiple aircraft systems, and the base's operational tempo was pushing both equipment and personnel beyond recommended limits. Her analysis showed a statistical probability of serious mechanical failure within the next 30 days, but she had no official avenue to report these findings without violating the written warning she had received. Emma was caught between her professional knowledge that aircraft were becoming dangerously compromised and explicit orders to limit her involvement to basic mechanical tasks. The situation became more complex when Lieutenant Martinez approached her during a night shift. "Emma," he said quietly, using her first name for the first time, "I need to ask you something confidential." They were alone in the maintenance hangar, the only sounds coming from the ventilation system and distant radio chatter from the control tower. Martinez looked around carefully before continuing. 3 pilots have mentioned navigation inconsistencies during the past week. Nothing officially reportable, but subtle problems with fuel consumption calculations and atmospheric compensation that don't match standard planning parameters. Problems that could become dangerous under combat conditions. Emma looked up from the hydraulic system she was servicing. What kind of inconsistencies? Wind drift calculations that were off by. Dangerous margins, fuel consumption rates that didn't account for altitude variations, approach vectors that ignored crosswind conditions. The kind of mistakes that shouldn't happen with experienced flight planning staff. Emma's analysis had identified exactly those problems, but reporting them would violate her written warning. Have these been raised through official channels? Martinez shook his head. The pilots don't want to seem incompetent by questioning planning staff, but they're starting to double-check everything themselves, which increases workload and creates opportunities for different kinds of errors. What do you want me to do? Emma asked carefully. I know you have knowledge that goes beyond ground crew training. If you could review some flight plans unofficially, identify potential problems before they become dangerous situations. Martinez paused. I'm not asking you to violate any orders, just to use your expertise to keep people alive. Emma considered the request. Helping Martinez would directly contradict Morrison's written warning, but refusing might mean allowing preventable accidents to occur. I can look at technical data informally, but any recommendations would have to come through you, not from Emmy directly. Understood, Martinez replied. And Emma, thank you. Some of us know you're more than just ground crew, even if the system doesn't recognize it officially. That night, Emma began what would become a covert operation to maintain flight safety through unofficial channels. She analyzed flight plans that Martinez discreetly provided, identified potentially dangerous atmospheric conditions that official meteorology missed, and calculated fuel consumption rates with greater precision than standard planning protocols. Her expertise was being utilized, but invisibly and at considerable personal risk. If Morrison discovered that she was continuing to provide operational analysis, the consequences would likely include immediate transfer and possible disciplinary action. But Emma had made her choice. Aircraft needed to function properly. Pilots needed to come home alive, and the mission mattered more than her career security. The foundation was being laid for a confrontation that would test not only her technical knowledge, but her courage to act when official systems failed, and lives hung in the balance. What she didn't anticipate was how quickly that test would come, or how dramatically it would expose the gap between official authority and actual competence when crisis struck Base Grayson with devastating suddenness. The crisis that would change everything began at 0-6-30 hours on a Tuesday morning. That started exactly like any other. Emma Rodriguez was in the maintenance hangar, performing hydraulic pressure checks when the emergency klaxon began wailing across Base Grayson with the distinctive pattern that meant imminent danger. All stations, scramble alert. Echo Squadron engaged in hostile contact, Sector 7. Electronic jamming reported, navigation systems compromised. Through the hangar's open doors, Emma could see pilots running toward the operations center while ground crews secured equipment in the controlled chaos that always accompanied a real emergency. Echo Squadron, 6 F-16 Fighting Falcons conducting routine border patrol, had encountered unexpected enemy aircraft in what should have been empty airspace. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes was coordinating the response from the main control room when the first distress call crackled through the base communication system. Base, this is Echo 6 Actual. We have multiple hostiles, estimated 8 to 12 aircraft. Our navigation systems are being jammed. GPS is down. Inertial guidance is unreliable. We need immediate flight lead coordination for safe return to base. Emma stopped working and listened intently. Echo 6 Actual was Captain David Martinez, the pilot who knew about her unofficial expertise. Professional and experienced, not prone to panic. If he was requesting emergency flight coordination, the situation was genuinely dangerous. The control room erupted in controlled chaos. The primary flight coordination officer was at another base for advanced training. The backup coordinator had called in sick with severe flu symptoms. The duty officer was competent for normal operations, but had never handled combat flight coordination under electronic warfare conditions. Echo 6, stand by for flight lead assignment, came the response. From base operations, but there was a significant problem. The base's automated weather calculation and navigation systems were malfunctioning, affected by the same electronic interference that was jamming the aircraft. Without accurate atmospheric data and reliable computation systems coordinating 6 aircraft through potentially hostile airspace would be extremely dangerous. Emma set down her tools and walked to the auxiliary control station in the maintenance area. This station had basic radar capabilities and manual calculation equipment, older systems that weren't susceptible to the electronic warfare affecting the main computers. She began calculating wind patterns using raw meteorological data, working through complex mathematics by hand. "Rodriguez, what are you doing at that station?" Major Walsh strode over with an expression of cold irritation. "Sir, I was calculating backup navigation data for Echo Squadron." "You're ground crew. That's not your job. Get back to your assigned duties immediately." Emma looked at the calculations she had completed. The standard return route would take Echo Squadron through a severe wind shear zone that could cause control problems, especially for aircraft with compromised navigation systems. The safer route required precise coordination, but would ensure the squadron's safe return through deteriorating weather conditions. "Sir, the atmospheric conditions indicate." "I said get back to work, Rodriguez." Walsh walked away, dismissing her completely. Emma returned to her maintenance duties, but continued monitoring radio traffic as Echo Squadron remained engaged with hostile aircraft, burning fuel and ammunition while trying to navigate home through electronic jamming and increasingly dangerous weather. 20 minutes later, the situation deteriorated rapidly. "Base, Echo 6 Actual. We are Winchester on missiles, low on fuel, and still experiencing intermittent navigation. We need immediate guidance for return to base. Weather is deteriorating and we have injured personnel." The base operations center was struggling without automated systems. They were having difficulty calculating the complex navigation required to safely guide 6 aircraft through the storm system that had moved into their operational area. Standard procedures were failing, and the backup systems were proving inadequate for the emergency conditions. That's when Captain Martinez made a decision that would change everything at Base Grayson. "Base, Echo 6 Actual requesting specific flight lead. Call sign Ground Angel." The radio went silent in the operations center. Officers looked at each other in confusion, checking their personnel rosters and communication protocols. "Echo 6, say again." "Unknown call sign." "Negative, Base. Ground Angel is known to Echo 6. Request she be assigned as flight lead for this recovery operation." Major Walsh, who was monitoring the radio communication, grabbed his microphone with visible frustration. "Echo 6, there is no call sign Ground Angel assigned to this base." Martinez's voice came back immediately, calm but absolutely firm. "Base, verify with maintenance section. Female, approximately 28 years old, extensive flight coordination knowledge. She has guided Echo flights before under emergency conditions." Walsh looked across the hangar toward Emma, who was still working on hydraulic systems, apparently oblivious to the radio conversation that was determining her fate. Pieces began clicking together in Walsh's mind. 3 months of unusual incidents, pilots who seemed unusually confident during challenging conditions, and the persistent reports of unidentified ground personnel providing exceptional technical support. Echo 6, are you requesting a ground crew member as flight lead coordinator? Affirmative, base. She has the knowledge and capability we need. Right now, she's our best option for getting home alive. The hangar fell completely silent. Every ground crew member, every technician, every person within hearing distance had stopped working to listen to the impossible conversation unfolding over the radio system. Emma had once guided an F-16 through a manual landing using only radio communication and mathematical calculations, something that had never been officially reported, but had saved both aircraft and pilot. The aviator that night had been David Martinez, who now called her ground angel in front of the entire base command structure. Walsh stared at Emma for a long moment, processing the implications of what he was hearing. Then another transmission filled the hangar with desperate urgency. Base, Echo 6 actual. We are at bingo fuel in 10 minutes. We need immediate guidance, or we'll have to consider emergency landing procedures in hostile territory. The choice was suddenly clear and terrifying. Allow 6 aircraft and their pilots to attempt emergency procedures that might result in casualties and lost equipment, or trust the unofficial expertise of a ground crew technician who wasn't supposed to have the knowledge to save them. Rodriguez, Walsh called out, his voice carrying across the hangar. Get over here. Emma approached the radio station, confusion and concern evident on her face. She could see the tension in Walsh's posture, hear the desperation in the radio transmissions, and feel the weight of every person in the hangar watching her. Echo 6 is requesting you as flight lead, Walsh said quietly. Care to explain how a ground crew technician becomes a flight coordinator? Before Emma could answer, Martinez's voice filled the hangar with calm determination. Ground angel, if you're listening, we need you. 6 aircraft, compromised navigation, hostile jamming, weather moving in. Same situation as before, but with higher stakes. Emma looked at the radio, then at Major Walsh, then at the assembled ground crew who had stopped everything to witness this moment. Her throat felt dry, but her voice was steady when she finally spoke. Sir, I have unofficial training in emergency flight coordination. European Joint Training Center, emergency navigation protocols. If Echo Squadron needs guidance, I can provide it. The breaking point had arrived. Everything that had been building for months, the dismissals, the warnings, the systematic underestimation of her capabilities, crystallized into this single moment when official procedures had failed and only her expertise could bring 6 pilots home alive. Walsh stared at her for what felt like an eternity. Why didn't this appear on your personnel file? Because it was classified research, and because when I requested transfer to ground crew, I thought I was finished with flight operations. Another transmission crackled through the speakers, more urgent than before. Base, Echo Squadron at critical. Fuel levels. Need guidance immediately. Walsh grabbed the microphone, his hand shaking slightly. Echo 6, standby. He looked at Emma one final time. Can you really guide them home? Yes, sir. But I'll need access to the auxiliary radar systems and manual calculation equipment. Major Walsh made the decision that would either save 6 lives or end both their careers. Do it. For the first time in 3 years, Emma Rodriguez was about to do what she was actually trained for. And this time, everyone would know exactly who was bringing Echo Squadron home safely through the storm. Emma Rodriguez moved to the auxiliary control station with the fluid confidence of someone who had been waiting her entire career for this moment. The hand-calculated atmospheric data she had been working on earlier was still there, along with projected flight paths and fuel consumption estimates that no one had authorized her to create. She picked up the microphone, and when she spoke, Her voice carried the calm authority of someone who understood exactly what needed to be done. Echo Squadron, this is Ground Angel. I have your position and current atmospheric conditions. Prepare to receive manual navigation guidance. Captain Martinez's response came back immediately, relief evident even through the static and electronic. Interference. Ground Angel, Echo 6 Actual. We are ready to receive guidance. For the first time in 3 years, Emma was doing what she had been trained for at the European Joint Training Center, coordinating multiple aircraft through hostile conditions using nothing but mathematics, atmospheric analysis, and voice. Communication. Echo Squadron, Ground Angel. Begin descent to flight level 200, heading 270. Wind compensation 3 degrees right. Be advised, severe crosswinds at Angels 15. Recommend maintaining current altitude until further notice. Major Walsh watched in amazement as Emma transformed from the quiet ground crew technician everyone thought they knew into a flight coordination specialist with absolute confidence in her abilities. Her voice was calm, professional, completely different from the person who had been checking hydraulic systems 20 minutes earlier. Ground Angel, Echo 6 descending to 200, turning to 270, Martinez confirmed. On the auxiliary radar screen, Emma could see the 6 aircraft adjusting their formation according to her guidance. She was calculating their fuel consumption rates in real time, monitoring weather pattern changes, and plotting the safest route home through increasingly complex atmospheric conditions that would have challenged even the base's automated systems. Echo 2, adjust heading to 265. You're drifting into wind shear that could cause control problems. Copy, Ground Angel, turning to 265. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes arrived in the maintenance hangar after hearing reports of the unprecedented situation. She stood quietly beside Major Walsh, listening as Emma coordinated the complex return of 6 combat aircraft, using manual calculations and voice communication alone. Echo Squadron, be advised weather front approaching from northwest. Recommend increase airspeed to 280 knots to clear the system before it affects your approach corridor. Ground Angel, Echo 6 increasing speed. How did you identify that weather front? Our meteorological data doesn't show any significant systems. Emma glanced at the atmospheric charts she had been maintaining throughout the morning. I've been tracking it for the past 2 hours, Echo 6. Standard pressure. Differential analysis combined with wind velocity measurements. What she didn't mention was that she had been performing those calculations during her lunch break, anticipating that the weather might affect evening flight operations. The kind of proactive analysis that had been dismissed as unauthorized overreach was now proving essential for mission success. Lieutenant Martinez's voice came through the radio with growing confidence. Ground Angel, Echo 4 is reporting fuel consumption rates better than projected. Your navigation is more efficient than our standard flight planning. Emma allowed herself a small smile. Copy, Echo 4. Optimize routing based on real-time atmospheric conditions rather than standard projections. Major Walsh leaned closer to Lieutenant Colonel Hayes. Ma'am, she's performing coordination tasks that normally require a team of specialists and advanced computer systems. And she's doing it better than our automated systems would under these conditions. Hayes nodded, studying Emma with newfound respect. Where did we find her? She's been here for 3 years, Walsh replied quietly. We just never asked what she could really do. 25 minutes after beginning the coordination, Emma's voice filled the hangar with the words everyone had been waiting to hear. Echo Squadron, Ground Angel, you are cleared for final approach. Weather conditions optimal, runway clear, all aircraft showing normal fuel reserves. Through the hangar's open doors, the first of 16 appeared on the visual horizon, followed by the other 5 aircraft in perfect formation. Echo Squadron was home safe, with fuel to spare and all personnel uninjured. As the aircraft landed one by one, ground crews and support personnel gathered outside the hangar to watch. Word had spread throughout Base Grayson that the ground crew woman had just successfully coordinated a complex combat recovery operation that had challenged every other available resource. Captain Martinez was the first pilot to approach Emma after aircraft shut down. He pulled off his helmet and walked directly to where she stood by the radio equipment, his expression combining gratitude and vindication. "Ground Angel," he said, extending his hand. "Thank you, again." Emma shook his hand, suddenly feeling the weight of what had just occurred. "Just doing my job, Captain." "No," Martinez replied firmly. "You were doing everyone's job better than anyone else could have done it." The other Echo Squadron pilots gathered around, each wanting to thank the woman who had guided them safely home through conditions that had defeated the base's standard systems. But Emma seemed uncomfortable with the attention, already moving toward her maintenance station. "I should get back to my regular duties," she said. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes stepped forward. "Rodriguez, we need to discuss your actual qualifications and your assignment here." Emma turned to face the base commander, her expression carefully neutral. "Yes, ma'am. You're not ground crew anymore. Effective immediately, you're being transferred to flight operations. We need people with your expertise where their skills can be properly utilized." Emma shook her head respectfully but firmly. "Ma'am, I requested ground assignment for specific reasons. I prefer working on the aircraft rather than coordinating them." Hayes looked puzzled. "Why would you want to limit yourself to maintenance when you clearly have advanced operational capabilities?" Emma looked around at the assembled personnel, then gestured toward the F-16s now safely parked on the ramp. "Because usually the aircraft come home whether I coordinate them or not. But if I don't maintain them properly, they might not come home at all." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Those aircraft need someone who understands both how to fix them and how to fly them. That's what I can provide as ground crew, with additional training." Lieutenant Colonel Hayes nodded slowly, beginning to understand Emma's unique perspective. "But you'll be available for flight coordination when needed?" "When needed, yes, ma'am. But my primary responsibility should remain aircraft maintenance. That's where I can have the most consistent impact on mission success." As the crowd dispersed and normal base operations resumed, Major Walsh approached Emma with an expression of genuine respect and some embarrassment. "Rodriguez, I owe you an apology. We made assumptions about your capabilities based on your position rather than your actual knowledge." Emma looked at him steadily. "No apology necessary, sir. The system worked today when it mattered most." That evening, a small metal plaque appeared on the auxiliary control station where Emma had coordinated the rescue. It was engraved with a simple message. She was not in the air, but she led the sky. Nobody knew who had placed it there, but it remained on the station permanently. A reminder that expertise doesn't always come with impressive titles, and that sometimes the most important leadership happens from positions that nobody considers. Qualified for command. Emma returned to her regular duties that night, checking hydraulic systems and maintaining the aircraft that would carry pilots safely through future missions. But now everyone knew that the quiet woman with the notebook and the careful calculations was far more than just ground crew. She was Ground Angel, the voice that could guide aircraft home when everything else failed. Word of Emma Rodriguez's extraordinary flight coordination spread through Base Grayson like wildfire, but the real changes began quietly, one conversation at a time. 3 days after the Echo Squadron rescue, pilots who had previously dismissed her as just ground crew started seeking her out during pre-flight planning sessions. Lieutenant Jake Thompson approached Emma's workstation during the morning maintenance cycle, carrying a flight plan folder and wearing an expression of cautious respect. "Rodriguez, Ground Angel, Could I get your opinion on something? Emma looked up from the fuel system she was inspecting, surprised by the formal tone. What do you need, Lieutenant? Weather conditions for this afternoon's training. Flight. Meteorology is calling it clear skies, but something feels off about the pressure readings. Thompson spread his charts on a nearby workbench. I know you have experience with atmospheric analysis. Emma studied the meteorological data, immediately noticing discrepancies that the official weather staff had missed. These pressure gradients indicate wind shear developing around 1400 hours. Not dangerous for experienced pilots, but it could complicate formation flying for newer aviators. Thompson nodded, making notes on his flight plan. Recommendations? Delay the training flight 2 hours or modify the flight path to avoid the affected altitude range. Emma pointed to specific areas on the chart. The wind shear will dissipate by 1600 hours, but during the peak period, it could cause control difficulties. Thank you, Thompson said genuinely. I'll adjust the schedule accordingly. As Thompson walked away, Emma realized that something fundamental had shifted at Base Grayson. Pilots were beginning to understand that her knowledge could enhance their mission success rather than threaten their authority. The change became more pronounced during the weekly flight operations meeting. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes had established a new protocol requiring ground crew input on aircraft readiness assessments. When Emma's turn came to report, she stood with the same quiet confidence she had demonstrated during the emergency coordination. Aircraft 773 shows intermittent hydraulic pressure fluctuations that could affect landing gear operation. She reported to the assembled pilots and operations staff. Recommend extended ground testing before next mission assignment. Captain Morrison, who had been Emma's primary antagonist, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. How significant are these fluctuations, Rodriguez? Significant enough to cause gear failure during high-stress landing conditions, Emma replied calmly. The fluctuations occur primarily during temperature changes, which suggests seal degradation that could worsen rapidly. Major Walsh nodded approvingly. Recommendation? Replace the primary hydraulic seals and conduct pressure testing under various temperature conditions. Approximately 8 hours of maintenance to ensure system reliability. Hayes made notes on her operations board. Approved. Morrison coordinate with maintenance scheduling. Morrison's jaw tightened, but he nodded agreement. The man who had once dismissed Emma's expertise was now required to implement her recommendations for flight safety. After the meeting, Lieutenant Martinez approached Emma with information that would prove crucial for her long-term success at the base. Emma, I need to tell you something important, he said quietly, ensuring they couldn't be overheard. There's been talk among some of the officers about your background. Specifically, questions about why your European training didn't appear on your official personnel files. Emma felt a familiar knot of concern in her stomach. What kind of questions? Nothing disciplinary, Martinez assured her quickly. But Colonel Hayes wants to understand your full qualifications so she can utilize your skills more effectively. She's requested your complete training records from the European Joint Training Center. This was potentially problematic. Emma's work at the European facility had been classified, involving experimental flight coordination protocols that weren't supposed to exist in official records. Her transfer to ground crew had been partly designed to keep that expertise away from standard military documentation. Martinez, some of that training was classified research. I'm not sure how much will be available through normal channels. That's what I figured, Martinez replied. But Hayes is serious about integrating your capabilities into base operations. She doesn't want another situation where we have essential expertise that nobody knows about. That evening, Emma received a call from Colonel Rebecca Anderson at the European Joint Training Center, her former supervisor and the person responsible for developing the emergency coordination protocols that had saved Echo Squadron. Emma, I've received a request for your training records from Base Grayson. Congratulations on finally getting to use your expertise in a real-world situation. Thank you, ma'am. But I'm concerned about how much of the program details can be released. I've been waiting 3 years for this conversation, Anderson replied with satisfaction. The Emergency Flight Coordination Program has been declassified. Your training records can be released in full, including your role in developing the manual navigation protocols. Emma felt relief mixed with apprehension. What does that mean for my current assignment? It means you're about to become officially qualified for the expertise you've been using unofficially. Hayes has requested authorization to establish an emergency flight coordination position at Base Grayson, specifically designed around your capabilities. The conversation continued for 30 minutes, covering technical details and administrative procedures that would formally recognize Emma's advanced training. When she hung up, Emma realized that her career was about to change dramatically. The next morning brought confirmation of that change. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes called Emma into her office for a private meeting that would establish new protocols for Base Grayson's flight operations. Rodriguez, I've received your complete training records from Colonel Anderson. Your background is considerably more impressive than your personnel file indicated. Hayes spread Emma's training documentation across her desk. Certifications in emergency flight coordination, atmospheric analysis, tactical navigation, and crisis management that represented years of specialized education. I understand why you requested ground crew assignment, Hayes continued. You wanted to work directly with aircraft systems rather than coordinate from a distance. But we need to find a way to utilize both your technical maintenance skills and your flight coordination expertise. Emma listened carefully, uncertain where the conversation was heading. I'm creating a new position, Senior Aircraft Systems Specialist with Emergency Flight Coordination Authority. You'll maintain your primary responsibility for aircraft maintenance, but you'll also be available for coordination duties when standard systems fail or special expertise is required. The position would give Emma official recognition for her actual capabilities while allowing her to continue the hands-on aircraft work she genuinely preferred. It was exactly the kind of arrangement she had hoped might eventually be possible. Ma'am, I accept the position with gratitude. Hayes smiled. Good, because your first official coordination assignment starts next week. We're hosting a joint training exercise with international partners, and I want you as backup flight coordinator in case of emergency situations. As Emma left the commander's office, she realized that the systematic dismissal and underestimation she had endured for 3 years had finally ended. Her expertise was being recognized, her knowledge was being valued, and her position at base Grayson was secure, but the most satisfying change was in the attitudes of the pilots and ground crew, who had previously treated her as insignificant. Respect had replaced dismissal, collaboration had replaced condescension, and Emma Rodriguez was finally able to use her full range of capabilities to keep aircraft operational and pilots safe. The foundation had been laid for what would become a dramatic confrontation with the remaining elements of the old system that still refused to acknowledge her expertise. The joint international training exercise that Lieutenant Colonel Hayes had mentioned arrived 2 weeks later, bringing with it an opportunity for Emma Rodriguez to demonstrate her capabilities on a larger stage, and a final confrontation with those who still questioned her authority. Colonel James Patterson from the Pentagon's Aviation Safety Division had arrived to observe the exercise, along with pilots and coordinators from 3 allied nations. The week-long operation would test Base Grayson's ability to coordinate complex, multinational flight operations under various emergency scenarios. Emma had been assigned as the backup emergency flight coordinator, working alongside Major Rebecca Foster, a highly experienced coordinator from the main operations center. The arrangement should have been straightforward. Foster would handle primary coordination while Emma provided technical support and took over if emergency conditions exceeded standard protocols. The problem emerged during the first day's briefing, when Captain Morrison raised objections to Emma's participation in front of the visiting officials. "Sir," Morrison addressed Colonel Patterson directly, "I need to express concerns about utilizing unqualified personnel in coordination roles during an international exercise. Rodriguez is ground crew with some informal training, not a certified flight coordinator." Patterson looked at Emma's personnel file, which now included her complete European training documentation. According to these records, she has extensive emergency coordination qualifications and recent successful experience with combat recovery operations. "Successful, yes," Morrison continued, "but under emergency conditions where normal procedures had failed. This exercise requires precision coordination under standard protocols. We shouldn't risk international relationships by experimenting with unofficial personnel." The implicit accusation was clear. Morrison was suggesting that Emma's success had been fortunate improvisation rather than genuine expertise, and that including her in the exercise would embarrass Base Grayson in front of international observers. "Major." Foster stepped forward diplomatically. "Colonel Patterson, I've reviewed Rodriguez's training records and coordinated with her during preparation for this exercise. Her technical knowledge exceeds that of many certified coordinators, and her emergency experience is exactly what we need for backup support." Emma remained silent during the exchange, but she could feel the familiar tension of having her qualifications questioned despite documented evidence of her capabilities. The difference now was that she had official support from base command and recent success that couldn't be dismissed. Patterson made his decision quickly. Rodriguez remains assigned as backup coordinator. Her qualifications are documented and her recent performance speaks for itself. Morrison's expression tightened, but he nodded acceptance. Emma realized that this exercise would become a test not just of international cooperation, but of her ability to perform under the scrutiny of people determined to find fault with her methods. The exercise began with routine formation flights and basic coordination scenarios. Emma worked closely with Major Foster, providing atmospheric analysis and technical support while observing the complex coordination required for multinational operations. Everything proceeded smoothly for the first 3 days. The challenge came during the 4th day's scenario, a simulated emergency, involving multiple aircraft from different nations experiencing various system failures simultaneously. The scenario was designed to test coordination capabilities under maximum stress conditions. All stations, exercise emergency. Multiple aircraft reporting system failures. Request immediate coordination assistance. The simulated crisis involved 8 aircraft from 4 different nations, each reporting different technical problems that required individual solutions while maintaining formation integrity. Major Foster began coordinating the complex response, but within minutes, it became clear that the scenario was more challenging than anticipated. "Exercise control, this is Alpha Lead. Our navigation system is completely down. Need immediate vector guidance." "Exercise control, Bravo Flight reports hydraulic pressure loss, requesting emergency landing priority." "Exercise control, Charlie Squadron has electrical system failure, losing radio contact intermittently." Major Foster was managing the communications professionally, but Emma could see that the coordination was becoming overwhelmed by the complexity of simultaneous problems. Standard protocols were designed for single aircraft emergencies, not multiple international aircraft with different systems and communication procedures. "Foster, do you need assistance?" Emma asked quietly. Foster nodded gratefully. "Take Alpha, Lead and Charlie Squadron. I'll handle Bravo Flight and Delta Wing." Emma moved to the auxiliary coordination station and began working with the aircraft that Foster had assigned to her. Within minutes, she was providing navigation guidance to aircraft with failed systems while coordinating landing priorities for multiple emergency situations. Alpha Lead, ground control. Turn heading 090. Maintain current altitude. I'm calculating manual navigation based on your reported position and atmospheric conditions. Ground control Alpha Lead, turning 090. Your guidance is remarkably precise for manual calculation. Emma smiled slightly. Copy, Alpha Lead. Precision is essential when electronics fail. Colonel Patterson and the international observers were monitoring the exercise from the main control room, watching as Emma and Foster coordinated the complex multi-aircraft emergency with calm efficiency. What impressed Patterson most was Emma's ability to adapt her communication style for pilots from different nations with varying levels of English proficiency. Charlie Squadron, ground control. Your electrical system failure is affecting radio clarity. Acknowledge instructions with microphone clicks. 2 clicks for affirmative, 3 clicks for negative. The exercise continued for 2 hours, with Emma and Foster successfully coordinating the safe recovery of all 8 aircraft despite multiple system failures and communication challenges. When the final aircraft landed safely, the control room erupted in applause from the international observers. Colonel Patterson approached Emma's coordination station with an expression of genuine admiration. Rodriguez, that was exceptional coordination work. Your ability to adapt standard procedures for different aircraft systems and communication requirements is exactly what we need for international operations. Captain Morrison, who had been observing from the back of the control room, stepped forward with obvious reluctance. Colonel, while the coordination was successful, I maintain concerns about utilizing unofficial personnel for such critical operations. Patterson turned to Morrison with mild irritation. Captain, Rodriguez just demonstrated coordination capabilities that exceed those of many certified specialists. Her training is documented, her experience is proven, and her performance today was flawless. What specific concerns do you have? Morrison realized he was in an untenable position. Emma's performance had been observed by international officials, documented by exercise records, and praised by experienced coordinators. His continued objections were beginning to appear motivated by personal bias rather than legitimate operational concerns. No specific concerns, sir, Morrison replied stiffly. Good, Patterson said firmly, because I'm recommending Rodriguez for advanced certification and possible assignment to the Pentagon's International Coordination Division. We need people with her combination of technical knowledge and operational experience. Emma felt a moment of panic. The Pentagon assignment would be a tremendous career opportunity, but it would also remove her from the hands-on aircraft maintenance that she genuinely loved. Sir, I appreciate the recommendation, but I prefer to remain at Base Grayson in my current position. The combination of maintenance and coordination work is exactly what I want to be doing. Patterson looked surprised. You're turning down a Pentagon assignment? I'm requesting to continue serving where I can have the most direct impact on aircraft safety and pilot protection, Emma replied. Base Grayson has given me the opportunity to use all my skills effectively. The colonel nodded slowly. I respect that decision, but the offer remains open if you change your mind. As the exercise concluded and the international visitors prepared to depart, Emma realized that she had finally achieved the recognition and respect that had been denied to her for so long. More importantly, she had proven that expertise and capability mattered more than official titles or traditional career paths. Major Foster approached Emma as they secured the coordination equipment. Emma, thank you for your support today. You made the exercise successful. "Thank you for giving me the opportunity to contribute," Emma replied. "It wasn't an opportunity," Foster said with a smile. "It was a necessity. We couldn't have managed that scenario without your expertise." That evening, Lieutenant Colonel Hayes called Emma into her office for a final conversation about her role at Base Grayson. "Rodriguez, Colonel Patterson's report was extremely complimentary. He described your coordination work as some of the best he's observed in 20 years of international exercises." "Thank you, ma'am. I want to ensure you understand that your position here is secure for as long as you want it. Your combination of technical maintenance expertise and emergency coordination capability is exactly what Base Grayson needs." Emma felt the satisfaction of finally being valued for her complete range of abilities. "Ma'am, this is exactly where I want to be." "Good, because I suspect we'll be relying on your expertise again soon." As Emma left the commander's office, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from dismissed ground crew to respected specialist. The change hadn't come from dramatic confrontations or official complaints, but from consistently demonstrating competence until recognition became inevitable. The final test was about to come, a situation that would require not just her technical expertise, but her courage to make decisions that could affect the lives of everyone at Base Grayson. 6 weeks after the international exercise, Emma Rodriguez faced the ultimate test of her expertise and courage when Base Grayson encountered its most serious crisis in over a decade. It began with what seemed like routine weather monitoring, but escalated into a situation that would require every skill she had developed throughout her career. The morning meteorological briefing indicated a severe storm system approaching from the southwest, significant enough to ground all training flights, but not unusual for the region during storm season. Emma was performing routine aircraft securing procedures when her atmospheric analysis revealed something that the official weather service had missed. The storm system was developing characteristics of a supercell formation with potential for extreme weather conditions that could threaten the base's aircraft and personnel. Her calculations indicated wind speeds that would exceed the securing capacity of standard aircraft tie-downs, along with hail potential that could damage aircraft. Even inside the hardened shelters, Emma approached Major Walsh with her analysis during the noon briefing. "Sir, I recommend immediate implementation of maximum weather security protocols. This storm system shows indicators of extreme development beyond current projections." Walsh reviewed her calculations, noting the mathematical precision and atmospheric data that supported her assessment. The official meteorological forecast calls for moderate storm conditions. What makes you think it will be more severe? Emma spread her hand-drawn weather charts across the briefing table, pointing to pressure gradient calculations and wind shear analysis that she had been tracking since early morning. The pressure differentials are developing too rapidly for a standard storm system. Combined with upper atmosphere temperature variations, this indicates supercell formation with potential for destructive wind speeds. "Recommendations?" Walsh asked, taking her analysis seriously after months of proven accuracy. "Move all aircraft into hardened shelters immediately. Implement Category 4 storm protocols. And consider evacuating non-essential personnel from temporary structures." Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, who had been listening to the briefing, studied Emma's weather analysis with growing concern. "How confident are you in this assessment, Rodriguez?" "Based on atmospheric mathematics and current pressure readings, I'm confident enough to recommend maximum precautions," Emma replied. "The cost of over-preparation is significantly less than the potential cost of under-preparation." Hayes made her decision quickly. Implement Rodriguez's recommendations immediately. All aircraft to hardened shelters. Category 4 protocols in effect. The base erupted into controlled activity as aircraft were moved, equipment was secured, and personnel were relocated to more secure facilities. Emma continued monitoring atmospheric conditions, providing regular updates as the storm system approached Base Grayson with increasing intensity. 2 hours later, her analysis proved dramatically accurate. The storm struck with wind speeds exceeding 130 miles per hour, hail the size of golf balls, and lightning that overwhelmed the base's electrical systems. Without Emma's early warning and recommendations, dozens of aircraft would have been severely damaged and personnel could have been seriously injured. But the real test came after the storm passed and damage assessment revealed a critical problem. The main runway had been damaged by debris impact. The backup runway was flooded and unusable, and 2 aircraft that had been conducting emergency transport missions were returning to base with insufficient fuel to reach alternate landing sites. All stations, emergency traffic. Angel Flight 7 and Angel Flight 9 returning from medical evacuation missions. Critical fuel state, requesting immediate landing clearance. Emma was in the command center helping coordinate post-storm recovery when the emergency call came through. The 2 aircraft were carrying seriously injured personnel who required immediate medical attention, but Base Grayson currently had no usable runways. Major Foster, who was serving as emergency coordinator, responded immediately. Angel Flights 7 and 9, standby for landing options. We have runway damage and flooding, working on alternatives. The nearest alternate landing site was 30 minutes away, more fuel than either aircraft possessed. Emergency landing on damaged runways was possible, but extremely dangerous, especially with injured personnel aboard who couldn't withstand high-impact landings. Emma moved to the auxiliary control station and began calculating options that others hadn't considered. Her analysis of runway damage reports, aircraft fuel consumption, and landing requirements revealed a possibility that standard protocols would never recommend. Major Foster, Emma said quietly, I have a potential solution, but it requires manual coordination of a non-standard landing procedure. Foster looked at her hopefully. What do you have in mind? The main runway damage is limited to the first 800 feet. If we can guide the aircraft to precision landing beyond the damaged section, they can land safely on the remaining runway surface. That requires landing accuracy within 50 feet, Foster replied. Without electronic landing systems, it's almost impossible. Not with manual guidance and atmospheric compensation, Emma said confidently. I can talk them through the approach using visual reference points and mathematical navigation. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, who had been monitoring the situation, approached Emma's station. Rodriguez, you're talking about coordinating precision landings without any electronic assistance on a partially damaged runway with aircraft carrying injured personnel. Yes, ma'am. It's the only option that gets them down safely with their current fuel state. Hayes stared at Emma for a moment, processing the enormous responsibility she was volunteering to accept. If the manual landing guidance failed, the results could be catastrophic. But if they didn't attempt it, the aircraft would run out of fuel before reaching alternate landing sites. Do it, Hayes decided. You have complete authority for this coordination. Emma picked up the microphone, her voice calm and confident. Despite the enormous pressure of the situation, Angel Flight 7, ground control. I'm going to guide you through a precision manual landing. Follow my instructions exactly and trust the mathematics. Ground control, Angel 7. We're ready to receive guidance. For the next 20 minutes, Emma provided step-by-step navigation instructions that guided the first aircraft through a precise approach that avoided the damaged runway section and achieved a perfect landing on the usable portion. Her calculations were flawless, her communication was clear, and her confidence never wavered. Angel Flight 9, ground control. You observed Angel 7's approach. Follow the same guidance pattern, but I'm adjusting for wind changes and your aircraft's weight difference. The second landing was equally successful. Both aircraft safely recovered with injured personnel who received immediate medical attention. Emma's manual coordination had achieved landing precision that matched electronic guidance systems. Using nothing but mathematical calculations and voice communication. As the emergency concluded and normal operations resumed, Colonel Patterson, who had remained at Base Grayson for extended evaluation, approached Emma with an expression of professional admiration. "Rodriguez, I've observed flight coordination for 20 years, and what you just accomplished was extraordinary. Manual precision landing guidance without electronic assistance is something most coordinators would never attempt." Emma looked tired but satisfied. "Sir, the mathematics were solid and the aircraft were capable. It was just a matter of applying the right calculations. It was a matter of having the expertise to perform calculations that most people couldn't do, and courage to accept responsibility for the results," Patterson corrected. "That combination is rare in military aviation." Lieutenant Colonel Hayes joined the conversation. "Emma, I want you to know that your performance today, along with your consistent excellence over the past months, has established Base Grayson as a model for integrating advanced expertise with standard operations." Emma nodded acknowledgement, but her attention was already shifting to post-emergency procedures and aircraft inspection requirements. Even after demonstrating extraordinary coordination capabilities, her priority remained ensuring that aircraft systems were properly maintained and ready for future missions. That evening, as Emma completed her routine maintenance duties, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from dismissed ground crew to essential specialist. The transformation hadn't required dramatic confrontations or formal complaints against those who had underestimated her. Instead, it had come from consistently demonstrating competence until recognition became inevitable. The real victory wasn't in proving others wrong, but in creating a system where expertise was valued regardless of its source, where knowledge was utilized effectively regardless of official titles, and where the mission's success mattered more than traditional hierarchies. Emma Rodriguez had become exactly what she had always wanted to be, someone who kept aircraft operational and brought pilots home safely, using every skill at her disposal to serve the mission that mattered most. 3 months after the storm crisis, Emma Rodriguez stood in the maintenance hangar at dawn, performing her routine aircraft inspections with the same meticulous attention to detail that had characterized her work for over 4 years at Base Grayson. But everything else had changed in ways that reflected not just her personal journey, but a fundamental shift in how the military base operated. The transformation was visible in small daily interactions that spoke to larger systemic changes. Pilots now routinely consulted with ground crew during pre-flight planning, recognizing that technical expertise could enhance mission success regardless of rank or official position. The artificial barrier between flight operations and maintenance operations had dissolved into collaborative planning that improved both aircraft readiness and mission safety. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes had implemented new protocols that formalized the integration of comprehensive expertise into all flight operations. Ground crew members were encouraged to pursue additional training. Their technical recommendations carried weight in operational planning, and their knowledge was considered essential for mission success rather than optional support. Emma's role had evolved into something unprecedented: Senior Aircraft Systems Specialist with Emergency Coordination Authority. But more importantly, she had become the bridge between theoretical flight operations and practical aircraft maintenance. Her unique combination of technical knowledge and operational experience had created a new model for how military aviation could utilize expertise more effectively. The most significant change was in the attitudes of personnel who had once dismissed her contributions. Captain Morrison, who had been Emma's primary antagonist, approached her workstation during the morning maintenance cycle with an expression of genuine respect. "Rodriguez, I wanted to discuss the atmospheric analysis for today's training flights. We're seeing pressure readings that don't match standard projections." Emma looked up from the hydraulic system she was inspecting, noting Morrison's professional tone and collaborative approach. "What specific readings are concerning you?" Morrison spread his meteorological charts on the nearby workbench. "Wind. Shear indicators suggest conditions that could affect formation flying, but meteorology is calling it acceptable for training operations." Emma studied the data, immediately recognizing patterns that indicated developing atmospheric instability. "These pressure gradients suggest wind shear will intensify around 1400 hours. Recommend delaying formation training until 1600 hours when conditions will stabilize." "That matches my assessment," Morrison agreed. "I'll adjust the training schedule accordingly." As Morrison walked away, Emma realized that the most satisfying aspect of her transformation wasn't the recognition or official authority, but the collaborative relationships that had developed with people who now valued her expertise. The adversarial dynamic had been replaced by professional partnership that served everyone's interests. The broader impact of Emma's success extended beyond Base Grayson. Colonel Patterson's reports had generated interest from Pentagon Aviation leadership in developing new training programs that would identify and utilize comprehensive expertise more effectively throughout military aviation. Emma had been asked to consult on curriculum development for programs that would integrate technical maintenance knowledge with operational coordination training. Major Foster, who had worked closely with Emma during the international exercise, had been promoted and transferred to the Pentagon's Aviation Safety Division. Before leaving, she had submitted recommendations for systemic changes in how the military identified and developed aviation expertise. "Emma," Foster had said during her farewell visit, "your success here proves that we've been wasting enormous amounts of talent by limiting people to narrow specializations. The military needs more specialists who understand both technical systems and operational requirements." Emma had appreciated the recognition, but her response reflected the practical focus that had always driven her approach to aviation. "The aircraft don't care about organizational charts. They just need to function properly and bring people home safely." The international exercise that had provided Emma's dramatic public demonstration of expertise had led to invitations for her to participate in advanced training programs with allied nations. She had declined most of these opportunities, preferring to remain at Base Grayson, where she could continue the hands-on aircraft work that she genuinely loved. However, Emma had accepted one significant external assignment: developing training materials for emergency flight coordination that could be used by military bases worldwide. Her manual navigation protocols and atmospheric analysis techniques were being incorporated into standardized emergency procedures that would enhance aviation safety globally. The most meaningful recognition came from the pilots, who flew the aircraft that Emma maintained and occasionally coordinated. Lieutenant Martinez, who had first recognized her expertise during the night emergency landing years earlier, had been promoted to captain and assigned as Base Grayson's flight training officer. "Emma," Martinez said during a recent conversation, "I want you to know that pilots throughout the Air Force are hearing about the Ground Angel protocols that were developed here. Your emergency coordination techniques are being taught at pilot training schools." Emma smiled at the designation that had followed her since the Echo Squadron rescue. "As long as they're being used to bring people home safely, I'm satisfied." "More than satisfied," Martinez replied. "You've changed how we think about expertise and collaboration in military aviation." The physical changes at Base Grayson reflected the cultural transformation that Emma's success had inspired. The auxiliary control station, where she had first coordinated emergency flight, Operations had been upgraded with advanced equipment and designated as the Emergency Coordination Center. The metal plaque that had mysteriously appeared after the Echo Squadron rescue remained prominently displayed. She was not in the air, but she led the sky. Emma's personal workspace had been expanded to include technical reference materials, atmospheric monitoring equipment, and communication systems. That allowed her to provide consultation for operations throughout the region. But she had insisted that her primary workstation remain in the maintenance hangar, surrounded by the aircraft and equipment that represented her core professional identity, the evening routine that had sustained Emma throughout her years at base. Grayson continued unchanged. She still maintained detailed logs analyzing daily flight operations, noting potential improvements and identifying issues that required attention. The difference now was that her analysis was sought out and implemented rather than dismissed and ignored. In her small notebook, Emma had added a new entry written in blue ink. Real leadership requires no permission. Knowledge serves those who need it most. The mission matters more than recognition. As the sun set over Base Grayson, Emma completed her final inspection of the day and secured her equipment. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to utilize her expertise, and new ways to ensure that aircraft functioned properly and pilots returned home safely. Walking across the flight line toward the barracks, Emma reflected on the journey that had brought her from dismissed ground crew to respected specialist. The transformation hadn't required dramatic confrontations or formal complaints against those who had underestimated her capabilities. Instead, it had come from consistently demonstrating competence until recognition became inevitable. The most important lesson of her experience wasn't about overcoming prejudice or proving doubters wrong. It was about the value of expertise wherever it exists, the importance of utilizing knowledge effectively regardless of its source, and the reality that missions succeed when people are allowed to contribute their best capabilities. Emma Rodriguez had never wanted to be a symbol of systemic change or an example of overlooked potential. She had simply wanted to fix aircraft properly and help pilots return home safely. But in pursuing that practical goal with dedication and competence, she had demonstrated something essential about leadership, expertise, and the importance of creating systems that value knowledge over titles. Base Grayson had become a model for integrating comprehensive expertise into military operations. Other installations were implementing similar programs that encouraged broader utilization of personnel capabilities and collaborative approaches to mission planning. Emma's success had proved that some of the most important contributions come from people who were never officially qualified for them. As she reached her quarters, Emma looked back at the flight line where aircraft sat ready for tomorrow's missions. Each plane represented lives that depended on proper maintenance, accurate navigation, and competent coordination when emergency situations arose. That responsibility remained the driving force of her career, not recognition or advancement, but the simple commitment to bringing people home safely. The story of Ground Angel had become legend throughout military aviation, but for Emma Rodriguez, it remained exactly what it had always been, just doing her job as well as she possibly could, using every skill at her disposal to serve the mission that mattered most. In the end, that was the most powerful legacy of all, proving that excellence needs no permission. Expertise serves whoever needs it most. And sometimes the safest hands to guide people home belong to someone who never left the ground but always understood the sky. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.